Hi, everybody. Tonight we're joined by Claudia Acevedo-Quiñones, a writer from Puerto Rico and a Stony Brook alum. Her poems and prose have been appeared in Wildness, the Book and Rail, Ambit Magazine, and other publications. Her chapbook, Bedroom Pop, was published by Dancing Press in 2021. She was awarded a Letras Boricuas Fellowship by the Flamboyán Arts Fund and the Mellon Foundation in 2022. Her full-length debut, The Hurricane Book, was published by Rose Metal Press this past October. And here she is today.
Hi, everyone. It's really nice to be here. This is maybe my second or third time on this campus. Thank you for having me. And the people on YouTube also. So I'm just going to read 4 short sections from the book. The book is composed of very short sections, so maybe these fragments without context are not going to make a lot of sense. So just consider them like character studies. They're going to be about the 4 most important people in the narrative. Those are my maternal grandparents, my mother, and me. Okay. So I'll start with my grandpa. This fragment is titled Oldsmobile. Abuelo, my name for Abuelo Pedro, drove a blue 1984 Oldsmobile Cutlass Sierra with a baby blue velvet interior. It smelled like cigarettes, agua maravilla, and pomade. He'd ride in it with the windows down and the radio on, leaning back on the seat as far as possible, with one liver-spotted hand on the wheel and the other holding a lit Marlboro Red. Sometimes there would be a Coors Light in the cup holder. Coors Light is basically water. The easiest parent to spot at school pickup was my grandfather. He would always be there waiting or just pulling up to put out his cigarette on the sidewalk at 2:10 p.m. sharp. I'm very short for this. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. If for any reason he couldn't make it on time, he'd call the principal's assistant and ask her to tell me his ETA over the classroom intercom. For 10 years, I could count on him being there to pick me up. Thin, wiry, pockmarked, annoyed, impeccably dressed, uninterested in socializing with the rich mothers he barely tolerated. There were Range Rovers and Hummers everywhere then. My classmates wore Tiffany charm bracelets. That was Guaynabo in the 2000s. Abuelo was a relic. I liked to pretend he was my chauffeur father, like in Sabrina. He'd load up my rolling backpack and ask about my day. I liked watching the dust and smoke poof up from the velvet whenever I punched down on the seat for emphasis. He indulged me, but he wasn't a big talker. He didn't believe in entertaining children. Sometimes we'd go to the market on the way back to his and Bella's house, sometimes to the Agencia Hípica to bet on horses, sometimes to play dominoes with his friends, sometimes straight home. His way of showing up involved minimal coddling, but for all his hardness, he was always surrounded by flowers. He grew orchids in the semi-exposed garage. He tended to pink and red roses, saved the pink ones for me, and removed the thorns. He treated my chronic ear infections with aloe from the garden. This next one is about my grandmother and manicures, skin picking, things that have to do with hands. Half moon. Neither Beba nor my mother went to beauty salons. My mother's reddish-brown hair went gray in her 30s, so she'd go to her friend Letty's to get her hair dyed Revlon burgundy every 6 weeks. Beba went to a woman down the street whenever her perm needed a refresh. She wore a perm until shortly after Abuelo died. She didn't get wrinkles until shortly before she died. When strangers at the mall or at parties asked her about her skincare routine, she said it involved washing her face and body with unscented Dove bars and removing makeup with Pond's cream. Y ya. She did her nails herself. In pictures taken from the 1950s through the 1980s, everything from her cuticles to the beginning of her nail plates, the lunulae, Latin word for little moon, was silver. The rest was red. She called all nail polish Cutex and all nail polish remover Cutex. I was supposed to know which one she meant when she asked me to fetch it for her. Cutex was the first company to release commercial nail varnish in the 1910s, but it wasn't until the 1920s and 30s when movie stars like Clara Bow and Norma Shearer popularized manicures that it became more acceptable for housewives to wear color on their nails. Leaving the little moons bare or painting them a whitish color meant you could go longer without having to reapply. Showing the world your moons were white also meant that you didn't have to work much with your hands. But Beba worked with her hands all day. There was a weekly menu. Monday was chicken spaghetti and potatoes. Tuesday was chicken and yuca. Wednesday was beefsteak and rice. Thursday was rice and pigeon peas. Friday was chicken and Coca-Cola and yams, maybe pineapple cake. There were sauces to mix. There were rubs. There was recao. On weekends, she didn't cook, but there was always a school uniform that needed mending, always something to sweep, shoes to polish, things to disinfect. Maybe this is why she spent so much of her downtime on the porch filing her fingernails or painting them. I'd sit in the rocking chair and ask stupid questions. She'd nod or shake her head and laugh, gliding the Revlon peachy pink she graduated to in her older years down her nails like she'd been doing it for centuries, layer over week-old layer. My mother and I share a skin-picking disorder, dermatillomania, which is in the obsessive-compulsive spectrum. This repetitive and voluntary need to right or wrong might be linked to my mother's compulsion to immediately dispose of any trash containing chicken bones or pull out brown bits of grass and pick up every fallen leaf from her lawn nightly, or brush her teeth so hard she loses enamel by the day. It might explain my need to immediately clean up after a party, rewrite the to-do list when I've only crossed one thing out, tweeze every single ingrown hair on my bikini line. We pick at our cuticles until we bleed while driving, watching TV, talking on the phone, thinking. When I saw her ridged yet painted nail beds, surrounded by rawness and all the fingers wrapped around the steering wheel, I asked her, ashamed for her, why she would hurt herself like that. Imítame en lo bueno, she'd say. When I first noticed my own mangled nail ridges in high school, I had no idea how they got there. This next one, don't really read that much because I'm worried my mom will be watching the video on YouTube. But I'll do it tonight because my friends are tired of hearing me read the same thing over and over again. All right, Nightlight. A week after my mother was discharged from San Juan Capistrano, having recovered from the first of 3 episodes she had that year, each requiring 3 to 4 week-long hospitalizations, she opened my bedroom door in her underwear. She was crying, begging me not to leave. I was a young teenager. I couldn't go anywhere at 3 a.m. in a town with no public transportation. In the days leading up to her committal, she'd call me at Bebas from her job at the industrial hospital and update me on the status of her memoir, which was nothing but notebooks full of chicken scratch piling up in the bathroom. She violently refused to use a computer. She'd cry out to her boyfriend when he was nowhere in sight. She dragged me out of my grandmother's house after a bender, ignoring my pleas to let me stay. And then one day after work, she sat in my grandparents' rocking chair and stopped speaking. She rocked herself and stared at the wall and smiled blankly, like the star of a Lifetime movie tackling mental illness very badly. It didn't matter how hard I cried, or how long I screamed, or how close to her face I got, she wasn't there. It was like seeing the devil come. I'm not sure why or how I went back to living with her so soon after she got out of the hospital, but there I was, very afraid for my mother and for myself, and with nowhere to go. After she went back to sleep, I stared at my nightlight and prayed faithfully for the first time in my life. My mother had met Johnny in high school, but didn't pay attention to him until their 20th high school reunion. He was a short, quiet chemist with 2 sons from a previous marriage that had ended amicably. By then, I was used to her being with men who yelled or stole her credit cards, so even though I hated being dragged out to so many of their dates, a part of me was relieved that she had found someone sweet. I remember the gaudy fish vase he sent to Bebas for when she got back from the hospital, and the calm way he spelled out for me what bipolar disorder and psychotic episodes were. Eventually, the time between calls grew longer, a type of gradual coldness that I've become familiar with in my own romantic life, until the calls stopped altogether after she was discharged for the 3rd time that year. Her face was covered in boils. Sorry. It must have been the drug cocktails, the lack of baths, or a combination of the two. My mother struggled with acne her whole life, as have I, and had a strict cleaning and medication routine for many years that had kept it under control. But when I saw her again, she was a raw nerve. The very core of who she was, the pain, imbalance, and fear were all showing on her body. She had lost close to 30 pounds. My grandmother, at a loss for real solutions, spent the week before her return buying her pajama sets, dozens of them, cute, cheap cotton ones in different pastel colors, with tiny flowers and geometric shapes, the kind I used to wear to sleep when I was little. It's hard to describe the feeling of losing a live parent. Neither of mine have died. I must have looked at her the way she looked at me when I ran down to her estranged friend's arms instead of hers. It's not that I had been safe before, but it was obvious now that I'd never be safe. I saw how fast a person could disappear. And I'll end with a short poem. I think this is the last poem in the book. Our Walking Life. In my sleep, I drive from the passenger seat. In my waking life, my mother drooled at the wheel. My fingers were too small to wrap themselves around it. I'll dream of stray dogs hanging from my arms by their teeth. In my walking life, the ceiling beams fell on our heads, and my bones were too soft to run when I should have. All the murky water of some other night will be there in place of every inscrutable person I held in love. And octopus's ink will sludge down my throat. In my talking life, at the foot of my bed with an old quote, my father brushed off what I saw in the dark. He said with his big hands, "For all life is a dream, and dreams themselves are only dreams." But if that were true, he would have sat and listened. Okay, that's it for me. Thanks. Hello? Yes.
Okay. Great. Can you hear me? All right. Well, the first question I just had for tonight was the Hurricane book, which you just read from, balances between the personal, political, and the environmental. How was the process of balancing all of this? And were there any moments where you found yourself leaning into one more than the other?
For me, it was more leaning into genre as opposed to personal versus political. I like to hide behind poems. This started out as a collection of poems. I needed to write a thesis. And a lot of my seminars were kind of cross-genre, or rather I took seminars in different genres. So I used all my seminars to launch into a discussion of whatever hurricane poem I was working on at the time. And then it took like maybe 2 years of editing after the first draft of the manuscript, like basically my thesis was accepted by a publisher, that my editors helped me shape it into like a meatier book. And that included adding photos, making sure that if I had a short essay opening a section, I had a short essay opening all sections. So that's more or less like how the skeleton came to be. So I had a lot of help.
You just said it took you about 2 years of an editing process. And one of the things I was going to bring up too is that there were a lot of strong lines and impactful lines in the piece. What was the process like in the decision-making process like of deciding what stays and what you had to kind of get rid of?
I'm afraid of taking up space. It's probably kind of obvious because it took me a really long time to write this book and it's still only 160 pages. So I didn't really take a lot out. I was asked to add a lot back in. I had taken things out because it was too personal. There were some certain sections about my father, for example, that I didn't think were relevant and I didn't want to include when I sent it out to publishers. And then one of the first edits the publisher sent to me, it was like, we need to add more about your father. So I had to add all that material back in. But it was a matter of, I didn't have as much material as a lot of my peers do. Or at least not for like this particular project.
Sorry, I just had a question on top of my head.
Oh yeah, that's fine.
What was the most challenging part outside of the editing process and balancing, and you said leaning into one genre more than the other in the whole creation process?
It was all really challenging. This is one of the hardest things I've ever done. I think the hardest was finding the time to work on it. The edits I had to make on the book were really extensive, and there was a lot of research that I had to do, photo research, fact checking, apart from just like regular line editing. So finding the time was the most challenging thing. Also having to relive and kind of distill these experiences that I didn't think I'd have to touch again. And also standing my ground when I felt like an edit or a comment asked me to go somewhere that I didn't think was useful or helpful. But you learn a lot through this process. You learn a lot about saying no. I didn't say no a lot because I do think in the end it ended up the way it should have ended up. But learning how to make decisions, not very good at making decisions. So all of that was hard. It was hard because of the planning, because of the time it took, and because of the subject matter, of course. It was really hard to work a full-time job and then have to do this at the end of the day. It was like a zombie.
Is there anything that you regret putting in the book, or anything you regret not putting in it?
Sorry, I'm very distracted by the class next door because they sound like they're having fun.
Yeah.
Sorry, we can make this fun too. I'm sorry, what was your question?
If there was anything you regret putting into the book or anything you regret not putting in?
No, I don't regret anything that's in the book right now. I regretted a lot right before it was published. I was really afraid. I asked my friends to help me manage my emotional mini moments I had. But I don't regret anything. I think that the editors, I was really lucky with the editors I had. They were considering a lot that I wasn't trusting them to consider. And all of the conversations I've had with people who've read it, people from the island who've read it, have made me feel less afraid. So I don't regret anything. Yeah, no, this is all I've been thinking about for such a long time that it's hard to kind of talk about the experience without worrying that I'm like contradicting myself. But I don't regret anything. Yeah. And I don't think there's anything I left out either, or anything that I'd like to add.
All right. In the book, there's a section that you talked about a career change in your writing journey where you wanted to write a bit more creatively, and you kind of made that decision and you made that switch. But overall, throughout your entire writing journey, what initially piqued your interest into like, all right, this is what I want to do, like creative writing is for me? What inspired you to start writing creatively, and what kind of kept you going?
You mean after I left like journalism? I think I realized that journalism was something I thought I had to do because of money reasons. But then I spent a semester in journalism school, and I didn't like that I had to go and look for stories or try to make a story out of something that wasn't necessarily one. It just didn't seem like my way of telling a story. I just wanted to write poems. I just wanted to write poems since I was a little girl. So I really, it was also the recession. It was 2009, 2010 when I graduated college. No one was making any money. I wasn't going to go into debt to get a journalism degree. So I just worked and wrote in my free time. Yeah, and it made more sense to me. It was kind of disingenuous to do the other thing just because it seemed more presentable, like, oh, if you're a writer, you're a journalist or a lawyer, but it's not the same.
Yeah, it's not the same.
No.
You said that this started off as your thesis. But sorry. What inspired you or motivated you to essentially, what I'll say is make this? Because it started off as thesis and then it was something you published. In that time frame, what inspired you and motivated you, or what gave you the idea to kind of make this into your thesis, to kind of make this into something that you pushed to get published?
I think because it was the most cohesive long form thing I had written. Like I have friends who have 4 novels, but this was all I had. Like it was either this or I had a collection of poems, and I was sending both at the same time. This was just what was picked up first. That was it. Also, I want to eventually, maybe possibly like try to get an agent. I want to maybe publish more books. And I feel like it's easier to get all those things done if you have something out there already. So I saw that there were indie presses that had open submission periods. And because I don't have an agent, that's like one of like the better, more accessible ways of finding a publisher. And I didn't want to self-publish yet. I know that that's a good, viable option for a lot of people, but I wanted to try to do it the small press way first. I went with this because it's what I had. Yeah.
I'm going to ask this very cheesy question.
I love cheese.
But what was the first piece that you've ever written that you can say you felt proud of?
I wrote a short story for this book or in life?
In general, life.
I wrote a short story about an old man screaming in the middle of the town square when I was like 10, maybe. And I had read Gabriel Garcia Marquez's stories. I don't like his novels as much as his short stories. And that old man reminded me a lot, I guess, of the old men in his short stories. And I gave it to my uncle, and he liked it. So nepotism, he published it in the local nationalist newspaper, even though it was not political at all. And I felt really proud. My grandma put contact paper around it. Yeah. I felt like a complete story.
At 10?
I was like 10,
Yeah.
11.
That's
Yeah.
super cool.
He also published my first poem when I was around that age too.
Your first
That same
poem?
newspaper.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. That is super cool.
Yeah. He's cute.
Since graduating and completing your MFA at Stony Brook, has anything in your writing process or your writing journey changed? How has kind of the writing life changed since graduation, if it has?
It has, because I used to work by myself all the time, and it's really hard for me to be disciplined. I have a problem with accountability, but ever since graduating from the program, the friends I made through the program and I are all kind of living very close to one another. And we write together sometimes. We workshop our stories, our poems. So that's something I didn't have before. I never had like a group of people I could send work to that I was also friends with. That does make a huge difference because they're going to be really honest with you. And you trust them. So that's an important thing. And that's something that has helped my writing, and I think the writing a lot of my friends.
All right. I'm going to open questions up to the floor if you guys have any questions.
Making you walk the farthest possible. So Tatiana already touched on this or sort of asked this a little bit, but I'm wondering with the hurricane book, was there a point where it was it like a eureka moment where it all came, where you were like, oh, this is the unifying theme? Or did you kind of like, you were gradually working on stuff with the intention of achieving some kind of like unifying thing?
I think from the very beginning, like once I had poems for like the 6 major hurricanes that passed through the island, like that's in the 20th century, I felt like, okay, I have enough of a structure. Like I know I'm setting out to do this now. I don't have chapters, but I have hurricanes. So I did sort of have like a very rudimentary like skeleton. And that's kind of when I knew. And I think it took like a couple of months. But when I started writing those hurricane poems, it was like the first semester of grad school. That very first month is when Maria hit Puerto Rico. So that was all I was thinking about. I even like put diesel in my car, my brand new leased car, because I was so distracted. I don't know, I told you that, it's really dumb. And now it's gonna live on the internet forever. But yeah, I was kind of obsessed with that for that first semester. Yeah.
Bottom third of the snowman.
The bottom third of us. I've never heard this expression, but I imagine it is the foundation of this snowman. Right?
Yeah, like you start doing something and
Yeah.
oh, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah, I'll put a carrot here, maybe some olives.
Yeah.
I don't know. Belly button, who knows? All right. Hope that answered your question.
Hi, I know this is kind of a cursed question to ask a writer, but what are you working on next?
You know, I am prepared
Oh.
because everyone has been asking me that.
Mhm.
I want to take a big long nap and a break. And I want to write fiction from now on for the time being. I'm really into ghost stories right now. So I want to work on a short collection of short ghost fragments. And that's all I know so far. I've only written 2, but baby steps. I don't have like a daily writing practice. I try to journal every day. That is writing, but I don't carve out like 3 hours a day or anything like that. Maybe I'll have different circumstances in the next few months that will allow me to do that. But right now I don't. So I'm like going little by little.
Yeah, thank you.
This can be a specific question for this book or just in general. What are like your literary influences? Like what was on your mind when you were working on this, or also just in general?
I don't have anyone I was thinking about specifically. I'm not writing to anyone specifically, I don't think. But there are authors quoted in the book, mainly Puerto Rican authors I grew up reading because they were such an important part of my growing up. So I was thinking about them. But I guess Jenny Awful and Maggie Nelson are 2 people who I think are very like formally attractive to me. And they're also so smart emotionally. So I think those 2 are probably subconsciously like part of me writing this.
I was wondering when is a poem done?
I don't know. I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know when anything is done.
Yeah.
It's done when you decide it's done. It's done, I think, if you read it to someone and they find something in it, whatever that is. I think that's why if you're not sure if something's done, you should always give it to someone or read it to someone. Yeah, I have no idea. Our teacher, Julie Sheehan, if she's still teaching, right? She said every poem is a failure. Like, and it's true. Like you can't, even if you're writing about the smallest thing, it's impossible to capture the essence of that thing. Like the only thing you can do is try your best to paint it in a certain light. Or try to get something from it that maybe wasn't obvious before. But we're all failing all the time. And I think that's why we keep writing, because we're never going to get it right. And that's good, I think. And not knowing when something is done is good too. A lot of my book is not very conclusive. Like there's no like grand conclusion. And I think it's important to try to steer away from trying to achieve that, because questions are more interesting. And we're never going to find the answer to anything. We're just going to keep talking until we die. So we might as well like try to keep finding new ways, talking to each other. Sorry, I went off on a little.
No, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
I got another one. What helps you to keep producing? Or conversely, if you, or I guess the alternative is, do you just kind of write as things come to you?
Things never come to me. Like that's a lie. They do come to me, but they come to me when I'm in a place where I'm making money or enough money to not worry about it. And I'm in a comfortable living situation without 3 roommates and a cat. I don't have those circumstances, so it's harder for things to just come to me. So I have to look for them. And sometimes that's hard. But what was your what helps me?
Writing.
Yeah. Taking long breaks. Oddly, if you can manage it, asking a friend or a lover, if you can have their space for a day or two, changing where you're staying really helps, and allowing yourself the time to only write. Changing where I am really helps me produce. But I think that might be a symptom of me like always being with roommates.
It's going to take me a sec.
Asking questions. That's nice.
Hi.
Hello.
So I was wondering, when you were done with your thesis and, started revising this for publication, like what that process looked like for you, and, what the process of like actually looking for indie presses and sending the manuscript out and all of that fun stuff look like for you.
So I had lots of different versions of this book. I had a version that was just poems, version that was just like personal, and then I would go on Submittable and look for open submission periods, and I'd see what their requirements were. If I met 1 or 2 of them, I try to maybe reformat certain things and submit it that way. I think mostly Submittable. Also, poets and writers, they post a lot of submission period things. Bomb. Yeah, I would just like Google open submission periods and see if their style would vibe with mine. Also, I would only look for places that wouldn't charge me more than like $25. Sometimes they charge you like $50 to send 5 poems or something like that for a contest, So that's another thing you need to keep in mind, I guess. Yeah. And you asked about the editing process after, or? So because the manuscript was very slim at first, the editors asked me to expand it significantly. I had to add a lot of content. They basically said, well, if we're going to publish you, if you add this and this and this and this, and you have 3 years to do it, because they only publish like 2 books a year. So I was like down the line. And yeah, I did 3 rounds of edits. And after those 3 rounds of edits, like heavy edits, that took, the bulk of it was done in 2 years. Then I went through this like fact-checking process that I had to pay for independently because they weren't going to do that. They were obviously trusting me that I was doing my due diligence, but I wanted to make sure that I wasn't the only person checking myself. And that didn't take that long, actually. Yeah, it was long. It was arduous. Like, it was another job. Like, I would spend 4 to 5 hours, 3 to 4 days a week, for extended periods of time editing it.
Are there any other questions?
Any jokes?
All right, then.
Oh, do you have a joke? Oh, great. Remember, it's going to be on the internet, though.
Yeah. Wait, what is it? What do the oceans say to the shore?
Something with waves, but what is it?
Yeah, it's nothing, it just waves.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so
No, I like that. Thank you. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. Mitch Hedberg, brilliant.
oh yeah.
Sorry, I'm disrupting the writer's speak floor.
All right, then. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thank you all for having me and asking questions. Hello. I have books to sell. You can Venmo me. I also have a Square app. If you're interested in buying, they're $15, and I will be over there by office 3.
Are you signing?
I will sign too if you want. I'll make you a drawing too.
Thank you.